Hey there, my name is Jaden, and I'm here today to redo a build I made almost 8 years ago. This is Iron Man's hand. Check it out. Today's build is a throwback to one of my very first prop projects ever. I'll be attempting to improve upon my older work first and foremost with this one-piece palm template. The links to these patterns and the finger segments will be down below in the video description, so feel free to print them out and follow along. We'll be basing the palm of the Repulsor Glove in 6mm HD foam. If you don't have HD foam, 5mm craft foam sheets from your local craft store will work just fine. We can trace the palm pattern directly onto the foam in Sharpie. To get the cleanest cuts out of your foam, be sure to sharpen or replace your blades often. Working on a big sheet of foam can be difficult, so first things first, we'll separate the bulk of the palm from the roll. Then it's a simple matter of following our lines. An important note, be sure to cut the outer edges of the piece at an angle so that they meet at a corner once assembled. After the palm is all cut out, it's time for us to transfer all of our detail lines to the outer face of the foam. And don't forget to mark the one undercut on the inside of the piece. Once we've checked to see that our sides line up and we're happy with our markings, we can set the palm aside and go to town on the finger segments. I went through and marked out the patterns in a way that made sense to me, and I encourage you to do the same. There's 30 pieces in total, so I recommend some type of organizational system to keep everything straight. If you like these patterns, please consider supporting us on Patreon. You can get these templates a week in advance along with other goodies like the Hound's helmet from Game of Thrones. But for now, back to the build. With all the patterns for the segments labeled and cut out, I transferred them to some 2mm HD foam. I originally considered using 6mm foam for these parts as well, but I ultimately decided that 2mm foam would hold up better to the long-term wear and tear of a flexible glove. I chose to view the act of tracing and cutting the finger segments as meditative. There's definitely a lot to keep track of, but if you keep your finished pieces separate from everything left to take care of, you should be just fine. It's important to be gentle when cutting 2mm foam so that you don't accidentally stretch out your pieces. It's also worth noting that you'll want to cut the sides of the tops of the finger segments at an angle to create a slight edge along the join between the top and the bottom. To help shape these pieces even further, we'll be tracing the fold lines on the insides of the parts with a Bic pen. We're basically embossing the folds on the inside to give us a nice, soft edge on the outside, rather than letting the foam just become a tube. You'll want to do this now because after gluing, reaching these spots gets much more difficult. With all 15 top pieces embossed, feel free to toss all the finger segments into a Ziploc bag for safekeeping. I was worried about the fit of my glove, so I wanted to cut some easement channels in the back to make it easier for the palm to flex while getting the repulsor on and off. I also took the time to superglue 2 strips of 2mm foam on the inside of the glove to reinforce the end of those cuts. After test fitting the glove, we can have some fun with a technique I rarely pull out. To etch in the grooves of the palm, I'll be using my soldering iron and a wide bit. A wood burner would also work for this step, but I like the variable temperature on my soldering iron. With a steady hand and proper ventilation, you can melt the foam and get clean, wide grooves in the palm piece. Use caution, but be decisive. The resistance of the foam helps keep your lines steady. With the grooves etched, we can pull out a round bit at our rotary tool and grind in the curved recess around the repulsor. We'll need to carefully cut out the hole for our repulsor before moving on to heat treating and forming the palm. I took the time during this step to curve the joins between the fingers inward. Similarly, I put a fairly pronounced bend and bow in the back of the palm where it meets the wrist. With all the prep work behind us, we can finally glue our pieces together. In this shop, we turn to contact cement for most general assembly. A quick stir and you're ready to go. Best practice is 2 coats of contact cement for any given join to ensure a clean, lasting bond. For a full list of my materials, I have affiliate links in the description down below. It's an easy way to get you fully kitted out to follow along, and it helps support the channel. To assemble the palm piece, first glue the bridge of the thumb together, followed by the sides of the palm, and finally the bands between the fingers. That's all there is to it. The finger segments are a bit more fiddly. For the most part, the segments are quick to put together. Tops match to bottoms and get set aside. The tips of the fingers require a little more work to fit properly. Start in the corners and work your way from end to end, pressing the seams together firmly as you go for the best results. And don't be afraid to employ your heat gun to make sure your contact cement fully cures. After all that glue, you should be left with a big old pile of finger segments. I also stole some parts from a dollar store tap light for the repulsor and a cheap gray knit glove to use as the base for the handpiece. The pieces of the repulsor were assembled with super glue, and a tiny bit of hot glue was applied to the scored lines on the inside of the finger segments to help them retain their subtle edges. These pieces were all fitted to the glove, adding extra length to the inner bands of the segments where necessary. In this way, we can be assured that each of these pieces is bespoke and the best possible fit for our hand with the glove. With the light attached to the inside of the palm piece, the palm and the fingers were attached to the glove with hot glue, being certain not to burn my hand in the process. It's easier than it sounds. With all the segments attached to the glove, it's good to also tack the glove to the palm at the openings for each finger. This will help prevent the fingers from accidentally getting pulled down into the palm. For sealing and painting, I chose to stuff the glove with paper towel. Using a paintbrush, we're basically able to ramrod the paper towel into the fingers and pack the palm. It takes a moment, but the result is much easier to paint over, and the fingers should no longer be touching, which is ideal. I took the stuffed glove and taped it to an empty can of spray paint to use as a handle. We're almost ready to seal the glove, but before we do, we need to tape off the repulsor in the center of the glove. I just cut out a circle of masking tape and applied it directly to the plastic lens. With that, I applied a single heavy coat of gray Plastidip to highlight areas for filling. I used Quick Seal silicone caulk to fill any gaps in my seams and smooth out the grooves of the palm for a cleaner look. Again, links to my materials are down below in the description. Quick Seal is great because it can be quickly smoothed out by hand with some water and your finger. Being sure to wait for the Quick Seal to fully dry, we can take our hand outside again to apply a couple extra coats of Plastidip for a flexible base coat to our Rust-Oleum Gloss Red. Now comes the fun part. With everything dried to the touch, we can remove the tape from the glove and prep it for finishing touches. That means removing all the paper towel from earlier, but once that's done, we can bust out the silver rub and buff with an old, frayed brush to give our repulsor glove some wear and tear. The key to convincing metalware is to be aware of raised surfaces and edges where the finish would naturally rub or chip away. Try sticking to dry brushing the edges rather than large sweeping fields of silver. Before we call the build done, let's apply a little black acrylic to the grooves of the palm with a wet brush and wipe away the excess to give some real depth to those details. With the grime and wear looking truly superb, I think it's safe to call this build well and truly done. So obviously, here's the final glove all finished up, and I'm super happy with how articulate it is. This thing is never going to be something you're going to be super deft with, and you're not necessarily going to be picking up glasses of water with just the one hand, but it's definitely super comfortable, and I do have mobility. I'm really happy with the way the easement channels in the back, as well as this flap, allow me to move my hand around, and I'm not very limited in the wrist, which I think is actually super important, because if you can't move there, you're not really gonna be able to move overall, and you're gonna look very stiff. So this thing really is a lot of fun to wear because it doesn't get in the way of you. That said, I can only touch these two fingers to my thumb. I can't, oh, I suppose I can kind of touch my ring finger there. So, I mean, definitely not the little finger to the thumb. That's just not happening. Big win though, there's no closure on this. It is just attached to the glove. So all I have to do is sort of wrestle it off. There we go. And the paint and the finish really is that flexible. This is one of the many reasons I love foam. Suggestions for ways to improve this build. If you wanted the glove to remain gray or a different color, you could of course paint all of these pieces separately and then glue them on. I thought that would be really time consuming, so I didn't care for that. Plus, I really wanted this sort of change in red, but still red on the inside of the fingers, because that's more or less what the actual repulsor unit looks like. You could of course start with a red glove so that you won't get these bands of gray underneath where all the paint is, but I didn't mind that either because you can't really see it. There is a light in the palm of this hand. It's actually up underneath. It's pretty bright, and the sanding on the face of the repulsor really lets it diffuse very well, so there's definitely a center point, but the whole thing's very bright, and that's super fun. Again, that's just an LED tap light. It's super easy to use, and it's super effective. It's super effective. I think this build, more than anything for me, is just a testament to how far I've come. 8 years of prop making, and I've gone from this to this. And I can't wait to see what the next 8 years bring. For those of you out there just starting your prop journey, I really hope that this is a fun way for you to break into the craft and to try out something new. And for the longtime crafters, I really hope this is something that you can flex your muscles on and really make it your own. The templates are gonna be down below in the description. I really hope to see lots of you make this build. If you like these templates, if you like these builds, please subscribe to the channel and consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. It's time as always to give a huge shout out to our patrons, Jennifer, Pan Dulce, Kieran, and Austin of AJ Plays Piano. Thank you guys so much. If you yourself would like to become a patron, you can check out the link below. We're going to be running another patron poll this coming week. We're going to be making some really fun decisions about an upcoming craft off, so be sure to check that out as well. But for now, I've been Jaden. Thank you all so much for watching, and take care.